What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me here on episode 70 of the 90 Feet from Home Fantasy Baseball Podcast. We are presented by Underdog Fantasy, and I'm your host, Joe Orico. You guys can check me out over on Twitter at Joe Orico99. That's where you get caught up with all of my latest stuff, podcasts, articles, and all of that. But there's something more important going on today. We have a fun guest joining the show, somebody I've known for a good couple of years now, and I just realized, actually, he's my colleague at Fantasy Pros, hitting up the water cooler at lunch, going out for beers and all that stuff after work. Absolutely not doing that because we're all remote, of course. But Justin Mason, first time on the new show. Great to catch up with you, my friend, at Justin Mason FWFB over on Twitter. How you been doing?
Hey, we do the meetup in Arizona every year, so that's our colleagues getting together. You, me, the Welsh. I'm sure there are other people who from Fantasy Pros who head over to Arizona. So we'll be doing that again, hopefully in November. I'm doing well, man. It's great to see it.
You as well, man. I've already booked my hotel, keeping an eye on flights because they just fluctuate in price so much, trying to get in for a good deal, debating like a whole car rental and all that stuff. But definitely going to be down there in Arizona. I'm guessing that you guys are going to be, because I know it starts on Halloween this year. So you're
Yeah.
going to be coming in on the Friday, I guess.
Yeah, we'll be coming in on Friday. Unfortunately, with it being on Halloween, we gotta take kids trick or treating. Like Danielle's like, we are not leaving before Halloween. I was like, all right, I got no problem with that. But we'll be there for the whole weekend and just having a blast. If you've never gone to First Pitch Arizona, I highly recommend you go. It is just such an amazing experience. It's pretty much just a whole weekend of talking baseball. And watching baseball, but it's like I learned so much and I have so much fun every year. It's really my favorite weekend of the year.
Oh yeah, it's not even close for me. By far my favorite weekend of the year. I do the golf outing, which is really fun if you're interested in golfing. I don't think we've picked the course yet, but there's a great golf event we're going to do on Sunday, kind of pushing it back because of the whole Halloween thing. But yeah, you go to so many games. Justin and I don't tend to go to every single game. We tend to be more on the social side, hanging out, catching up with people. But there's so much that Baseball HQ offers. Check out their website. A little plug for them there. They do great work in putting that whole event together. But today I wanted to kind of mix things up from the usual, going through the daily box scores and the waiver wires. And we're going to have some fun kind of looking ahead towards next season. Whether you're still in the hunt or maybe you've given up already, I think either way, you'll have a little bit of fun with this show. We're going to be looking forward to 2025 and kind of predicting some rough ADPs. You never know with 100% certainty, of course, at this point in the season. It's kind of crazy to do it in August when most people won't be drafting till March. But and of course, there's different formats and everything, which will change. But we're going to just generally guess where guys are going to be going from just a general 5x5 standpoint, not getting into anything too crazy today, but talking about some real standout players. We're not going to be talking about anybody on the fringe today. We're going to be talking about some superstars. And let's start off with Paul Skenes, who I think at this point, he might be a first rounder. I did a little exercise, just tweeted out what I think will be the top 15 picks roughly next season. And I think Paul Skenes is going to sneak in there at the end of the first round. I think he's done enough in terms of talent. I think we've seen enough from him innings-wise that we can project an even further increase next season to the point where we're not going to have to really worry so much from that standpoint. Pittsburgh maybe slowly will get better, although the wins are probably going to be a little bit iffy. But I think we're talking about a borderline first-round player here, Justin. What do you think?
I think he's going to be borderline first round. I mean, I definitely think he's going to be one of the first 3 pitchers off the board, and I don't really have a problem with that. I think it'll largely depend on like how guys finish. You got to think like Tariq Skubal's going to be up there. I think Corbin Burns and Zach Wheeler are going to be kind of up there. He's kind of the steady vets that people just feel really good about. Tyler Glasnow is going to be up there. The problem is there's just so much good pitching that some people may go, I don't know if I want to take the risk on a young guy like Skenes, he's been fantastic, but he's unproven just from a volume standpoint. So I think he's going to be a top 3 to 5 pitcher. I have no problem with that. That probably lands him in the second round of most drafts. But there definitely will be leagues where he gets the first pitcher off the board and going in the first round.
Just from a pure talent standpoint, I think it's fair to say that he is the best pitcher in baseball. Forgetting about fantasy for a second, is it too soon to already put that title on him?
I think from a talent standpoint, I think it's fair to say that he is the best thrower in baseball. I don't know if he's the best pitcher yet. Sequencing, kind of learning situations. He's still really, really young. I think the upside is immense, though. And I just don't know how you pass up that kind of upside. I'm typically the type of person that passes up the upside in the first few rounds for safety, but like even a guy like Paul Skenes is going to be really, really high up on my board. I'm really interested to do my projections after the season is over and kind of see where he lands.
I was talking about this on a solo show a couple days ago that I've for the last few years been more conservative in those first couple rounds, going for the quote unquote safety and avoiding the guys like Gunnar Henderson this season, Ellie De La Cruz, CJ Abrams were not guys I was targeting. Bobby Witt Jr. the year before. But I think I'm going to kind of change my tune on that a little bit next season and take some more of those risks. Maybe go for a James Wood, even though he might be getting a little bit too expensive at this point, or take a Paul Skenes. Like if he's sitting there in the second round, if I get a real lockdown offensive piece in the first, if it's a Jordan Alvarez, a Jose Ramirez, a whoever, and then I can take Paul Skenes as my ace in the second. If he's still sitting there, I think it's going to be pretty hard to pass up in most cases.
Yeah, I mean, he's just the upside. I mean, it's Strider-esque upside, and we saw Strider going, first or second or third in a lot of drafts. So, I don't know how people are going to pass it up. I'm sure I'm really interested to see kind of some of the early drafts, and I mean, a lot of people stay away from the early drafts, but the early drafts really inform what the ADP is going to look like for the rest of draft season. And so, once those start going, we'll probably do one in Arizona. We'll have a better idea of kind of where Skenes falls.
Yeah, I always hop into one of those drafts in Arizona. And I think actually Rob DiPietro and Bubba and those guys, they do that really early draft. I think that's actually starting right around this time. It'll be interesting to see what we're talking about today and see if we can maybe predict where some of these guys are going to be going. Because they're going to be going, I think, like 15 rounds where they've only done like 7 in the past. So you'll get a good chunk of where some smart players are projecting these guys are going to be going and actually putting real money on the line in August for next season, which as crazy as it sounds, it's something I would happily do. We are full-blown degenerates. Let's talk about a couple of disappointing bats, and we'll start with Julio Rodriguez. 11 homers, 18 steals, 263 batting average. He's striking out a lot more than usual. The offense as a whole in Seattle has been terrible. Julio has 38 RBI and 45 runs. I don't know that he gets back into the first round at this point. Maybe he sneaks in there if he has if he comes back and has a really hot final few weeks or so, but I don't think that's guaranteed that he's a first round player again. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, unless he goes on a massive power surge over the course of the next month and a half or so, I just don't see it happening. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, he had 28 home runs his rookie year, 32 his second year in the league. He's only got 11 this year. If he finishes even with just 20 home runs, like, are people really going to be taking him in the first round? I mean, on upside, I guess alone, like I think maybe you'll see him sneak into the first round sometimes, but like I think he's likely going to end up being a guy who's probably a firm second round pick that maybe gets some helium at the end of draft season, especially if he has like a big spring training. But I think like especially the early drafts, I can't imagine that Julio Rodriguez is going to be in that first round.
Yeah, just looking below the surface, like the swinging strike rate is up a little bit from 14.5 to 16.5%, but he's still hitting the ball, even though those numbers are not quite what they were. Still a 10% barrel rate, 47.5 hard hit. I don't love the ballpark in the team context, of course, and that does kind of worry me. Like I wouldn't really want to take him over some of those guys I mentioned earlier, like the J Rams, even like the Harpers, the Freddie Freemans, the guys that I think are probably still going to be in the back end of that first round. I don't know that Julio is somebody that I really want to be taking. I know Rosarena coming in there is probably going to help out a little bit, but I don't know that he's a first rounder. The guy that you can kind of pair him with in terms of disappointment this season to some extent is Corbin Carroll, another first round outfielder that came on the scene a couple of years ago. We had massive expectations for, and he is really disappointed. Now Carroll's turned it around as of late. He's looked a lot better over the last maybe 6 weeks or so. But it's still 11 homers, 21 stolen bases. The thing that really kills you is the 220 batting average. Carroll's probably at this point, I don't think it's even a discussion of the first round right now. Maybe I think he's probably in the second, maybe 2-3 turn. That's where I'm kind of leaning at this point on Corbin Carroll. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's going to be in the second. I could see again, like if I mean, if any of these players have massive like final 6 weeks of the season, like we could definitely see them move up or move down if they really, really struggle. But I think he's probably firmly kind of in the back end of the second and he could move up into the first round if he goes crazy. Especially with the amount of speed that Carroll has. If Carroll was just to go on just an absolute tear in terms of stealing bases and getting that batting average up, I could see it. But I have a really, really hard time, especially you have to think that the shoulder has caused a lot of these issues with that, with a like dramatic drop in power that we've seen over this year. And unless he does something to really accommodate himself in terms of surgery, like, isn't that just going to linger? And that's going to probably take me out on Carroll no matter where he is.
That's where I've kind of been at with the whole, I've had this discussion with a few different people, Bogman and Welsh, Arizona guys, and tons of people in the industry. Nobody really knows exactly what to make of the shoulder because it was hurt last year, but he didn't actually miss more than maybe a game or two. As far as the team will tell you, there's nothing really wrong there, but there clearly seems to have been something wrong for most of the year. I don't really know what to make of it. Are they lying? Are they trying to cover up that there's been something hurt? That it doesn't really make sense in a non-contact sport to not just be upfront about it. If this was hockey or football and you're trying to avoid contact to that area, okay. But in baseball, I don't have. Does that make any sense to you? The way that they've gone about this whole thing?
I mean, I don't know. We never get all the information from teams, so it's really hard to know what exactly is going on in those situations. But it's hard because there's a part of me that goes, "Hey, the shoulder's got to be the issue." But like you mentioned, like he hasn't missed time.
Yeah.
Like, and would a team like really risk like kind of the face of that franchise, the future of that franchise, by just letting him continue to play with a messed up shoulder? Like we saw the Padres make Tatis go get surgery. Now they waited till he was suspended to do it, but he did get the surgery eventually. So it's so hard to read. Like I feel like something's got to be wrong because like it's just such a huge drop off that there must be something wrong. But maybe there isn't. Maybe this is just who he is. And if that's the case, like he's not a first round player for sure. And there's real questions about whether he's a second round player, especially when speed is a lot more readily available than it used to be.
Yeah, he's just not stealing like we all thought he would. I mean, he stole 54 bases last year, incredibly efficient 54 bases on 59 attempts. This year, he's only attempted 27. He's already been caught more than he was all of last year. So it's not just the power. Maybe there could be, if there's some shoulder problem that's impacting him stealing because of the way he slides or something, and he's more, a little bit gun shy to actually attempt those bases. I don't know. That's all conjecture, but whatever it is, it's been a huge disappointment this year. It's going to be it's going to be one of those where you're just hoping for the best if you're taking him in the second round next year, because you're going to do it because of the upside, and I'll probably do it myself, but it's not one of those that you're going to be so sure about coming out of your draft like you would with a Freddie Freeman or somebody who just puts up stats every single season. The way,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just been a weird trajectory here over the first couple seasons for Carroll, the way that he, kind of just fell off the way he did. But there's somebody that is going to be really interesting. I don't think as of today I'd really want to take him in the first round, just not knowing exactly what his situation is. But Ronald Acuna Jr., I think is kind of an interesting discussion. It might be a little bit too early until we know where he is exactly in terms of his recovery. But I feel like it'd be a little bit risky to take him in the first round right now. If he comes out in spring training and looks fully healthy, then I think he does end up there. But what are your thoughts on Acuna? He's also got both of these knees now banged up, and he's still a young guy already dealing with a couple major injuries at 26. So is he going to be more impacted stealing bases going forward? What are your general thoughts on Acuna?
Yeah, this is tough because, like I mentioned, when I draft, uh, especially early on in a draft, I'm looking for guys who I feel are going to return, who are most likely return value, right? I'm not necessarily looking at who's going to return the most value necessarily. I want them to return value where I pick them early on, because everybody you take in the first round is a star of some caliber, right? And what you don't want is that star to disappear or for the guy to bust. There's a lot of risk to Acuna. That being said, like dude has like the potential not to just be the number one overall player, but like blow out the competition in terms of the number one overall player. So for me, in spite of the fact that I typically don't draft risky, I think I'll be in if he's healthy. If he's healthy and ready to go and he looks good in spring, I probably won't draft him in very many leagues prior to spring training. But if he's healthy in spring training, I think I'm gonna be in. And I honestly, I mean, I obviously got to sit down and like actually like write out like the names and stuff, and do projections. But my guess is he'll be a top 5 player on my board if he's healthy coming into spring.
I think that's totally fair. My follow up, you kind of answered it because you and I are the type who will draft throughout the winter. I wonder if he will be going in the first round without really any knowledge. Like, let's say we don't get any updates. We enter into those drafts come December and we don't really know. And he's sitting there. Let's say you have pick 12 and he's sitting there and you have no update. Would it be too tempting to pass up at that point?
I think he would be. Like,
Yeah.
I have a hard time passing that up, to be honest. Yeah.
That's fair.
I think I'm in.
I think that's totally fair. I do worry a little bit, just like the offense as a whole has not been as great. His amazing season was like a perfect storm of everything going right. And I worry about if we're ever going to see him get to that same height again. Even if he doesn't, like you talked about, he can absolutely lap the field. So he doesn't need to exactly go like 40-70 with 150 runs. Even if you shave 10-20% off of that, it's still probably the first overall player. But it is like, and again, another one that does come with quite a bit of risk associated with it. Um, I'm going to be a little bit iffy on him if I have a top 5 or 7 pick, probably. But I think I'm with you that if you're in the back end of the first round and he's sitting there, which I feel like there's a good chance he will be, I'm probably going to be taking a shot on him.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, like, how many guys even have the potential, even if they hit their like 100th percentile outcome, to go 40-70? Yeah. And that's where you start having, I mean, Ellie, right? Like Ellie could potentially do it. But like, what's the chance he's actually going to be able to do that with, a batting average that doesn't like hurt you? But like maybe Bobby Witt, like that's 3. Like there's 3 players, including Acuna, like that can do that. So unless you're throwing a bunch of pitchers up there, like I just have a really hard time, like not pulling the trigger on a guy like Acuna if he's healthy. Like I said, it's a big if. Like we have no idea. I mean, I guess I don't think Ohtani could steal 70. So, but Ohtani could definitely hit 40, and definitely will this year. So, I don't know, man. Like I have a really hard time. I think you know what this tells you is I think it's going to be a really good year to draft at the back of the draft. I think there are going to be some really, really talented players at the back end of the draft that you can just pair together kind of like on that turn.
Yeah, there's going to be some guys that have missed a lot of time due to injury. Like Kyle Tucker and Fernando Tatis are probably going to be back in that 1-2 type of range. Again, like Corbin Carroll, Julio Rodriguez, you could build a team next year that's probably, at that 1-2 turn with a couple of guys who would have been going top 5 this year in certain situations. And part of that is because of down seasons, but also like in Tucker's case, if he was healthy the whole season, we might be talking about Kyle Tucker as a guy who would be in that Bobby Witt, Ohtani, Judge type of tier. But I don't think he's going to get there just because of some of that injury worry. But he comes in next year fully healthy. Again, this injury thing with Tucker is like the weirdest thing ever. But I think he might be one of those guys you're referring to there where you might get a discount on him at the end of the first round. Anybody else there that kind of come to mind that you think might just be pushed down a little bit? I think J-Ram's going to go up from where he was. I think Yordan Alvarez is going to be probably still at the back end of that first round territory.
I mean, Tatis kind of depends on what he, if he comes back, what he looks like when he comes back. But like, he's a guy that probably will get pushed kind of to the back end of the first round, or maybe, the top end of the second round. That could be pretty interesting. I think, other than that, like, I don't see too many guys. I mean, it'll be interesting where Mookie goes. Like, Mookie's been great when he's healthy, but he's missed so much time this year that like he just won't have the numbers that other guys do. Like that could be another guy, like in depending on his eligibilities too. Like he could be really, really valuable with that, double or triple eligibility.
Mookie coming back and playing in the outfield, because I think he was going to lose outfield next year if we're talking about a lot of leagues, because he hadn't played there at all this season. But I think he'll have second, short, and outfield in a lot of formats. And second base, he might be a couple of games shy, maybe, for NFBC. But I think in a lot of cases, he's going to be triple eligible in that Dodgers lineup if he's healthy. I mean, he was just doing incredible things. Like, even with all the time missed, I think he still might be a top 100 player for the season. That's just how great he's been. Somebody else, sticking with the theme of great players, what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has done as of late is just absolutely stupid. It's been a pleasure to watch him as a Jays fan, and I'm just so grateful they didn't trade him at the deadline, so I'm not watching him do this as like a Red Sox or whatever it would have been. By WRC Plus this season, he's actually been better than he was during his just ridiculous 2021 breakout. It's just 167 to 166, but just goes to show you how dominant he's been. He's got the average up to 323, 25 homers. He's been just unreal. I think he's batting 450 over the last month. Has he done enough to get himself back into the first round? Is he like kind of in that Yordan Alvarez tier at the back end of the first?
I mean, I think he should be, but I don't know that he will be. I think a lot of it'll depend on what the Blue Jays do decide to do in the offseason. Are they going to sell guys like Bichette and Guerrero, considering they're, coming up on their free agency years and they don't have them inked into a long-term deal? I mean, sorry to say, but it'd probably be better if they leave Toronto, considering I think Toronto's going to head into some sort of rebuilding process in the offseason. But and the hard part is first base. First base is historically a position that people do not want to take early on in drafts, except for when guys kind of like break the norm. So again, like, I think this could be a situation where Guerrero is towards the back end of the first half, or maybe the beginning of the second half, or the second round. And you can get a really good like pairing with him. Like, if you pair him with stolen base dude like Trey Turner or something like that, all of a sudden you got power and speed, and you're looking pretty good coming out of that like kind of 1-2 turn area. But I think he's going to be one of those guys that probably sits in the back half of the first round or top half of the second round.
It'd be interesting to pair him with Tatis, maybe, if that would be doable. And honestly, it might be. I think what he's done, he's probably should be like, there was a lot of talk a couple of years ago about how he was being compared to Yordan Alvarez. I think Eric Cross might have been the one who was the first one to like put that out there and say that Yordan was going to be the better hitter. And it looked like Yordan was far and away the better hitter the last couple seasons. Now it's looking pretty close. I think for fantasy purposes, I would give the slight edge to Yordan just because of the lineup around him, where you said Toronto is going to be entering into what's going to be probably a dark rebuild over the next couple of seasons, where it looked like the team was on an upper trajectory just a couple of years back. It looks like it's going to be pretty bad. So the lineup around him is probably not going to be so great. I do think he will be in Toronto long term. Don't know if I can say the same for Bo Bichette, though. And Bo Bichette has been, I mean, he hasn't played in a little while. He has been hurt, but in his 80 games, 4 homers, 5 steals, he batted .222. Is Bo Bichette at this point, like, is he a top 100 player? Is that a crazy thing? Is he top 100 at this point? Because I don't know if he is at such a crowded shortstop position right now.
I mean, I have a hard time saying that he is, especially if he stays in Toronto. Again, like you said, like, I don't know what this team's going to look like next year. I don't think he does. I think he's probably the more likely of the two to get traded. But they may decide they want to hold on to him and see if they can kind of recoup some of his value and send him away at the deadline. It's so hard because he stopped running, last year, and this year he stopped doing everything. And so it's really, really difficult to figure out, like, hey, what is Bo Bichette at this point? I still think he is a pretty good hitter, and this has just been a really bad year for him. But there just is so little upside because he doesn't have prodigious power. Like, I can't imagine that, like, I know he had 29 home runs in the 2021 year. I'm not necessarily buying that. I think he's a low 20s homer guy with a good batting average and some chip and stolen bases. Is that a guy you're taking in the top 100, though, especially coming off of this kind of year? I don't think it is. I think he's probably outside top 100. I wouldn't be surprised if he fell like closer to 150.
It's crazy. It's crazy how just a few months, like where was he going this year? In the third? I think he was the third round pick for the most part.
Yeah,
Like
I
that.
think third, fourth rounder. Like it's oh, actually, I can check because I have the player rater on FanGraphs up. He was pick 37, 38 on average in ADP.
So third round in the 15,
So yeah,
fourth round in the 12.
yeah. So I mean, like that is that is a killer of a draft pick. Like I mean, in baseball, it's not like football where like one or two players going down really destroys your season because it's such a long season, and like you can kind of recoup value on the wire if you're active. But like that kills you. That like it's not the reason you lost, but it may be one of the reasons you lost.
You had to nail the subsequent picks and the picks around it. Like if you paired that with a Nolan Jones or something, like you're probably kissing that team goodbye, unless there's like you had to really hit on some of those later round picks. With Bo, I don't think you go from leading the league in hits 2 consecutive years, age 23 and 24, to just stinking up the joint to this degree. And it's real. I think he's still so young. I think he will rebound. And honestly, if he does end up going a pick 150 next year, wherever he's playing, I feel like I'm going to smash the hell out of that draft button because he has the potential to hit 300. He could give you 200 hits. He can probably still get back to like the 20 home run range. Like he's consistently giving you like close to a 10% barrel rate, in the 45% hard hit rate. He's not a huge power guy, but he's definitely not a nothing. And the stolen bases, I don't think those are really ever coming back. But you
No.
might get 6 or 7, maybe. It's not nothing. I think if he's going at 150, I'm taking him every day.
I will say what like the new stolen base rules have shown, especially when you like look at guys like Jesse Winker who had like I think 4 career stolen bases and then like and just ran wild in Washington. It really depends on where you're at, like what the team wants to do. Like I think like a guy like Bichette, like he's got the ability to run if the Jays let him run. They're not though. So like if he ends up like if he were to be traded to a team like for instance, let's say the Angels like said, "Hey, let's bring in Bo Bichette," right? Or just a team that likes to run a lot. All of a sudden, he could become like a guy that does steal 30 bases because I think the speed there's enough speed in there. It's mostly about opportunity and then being given that green light to go.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so unpredictable too. Like you're a Giants guy. Because I did handmade projections this year. Talking with you and Paul before the season, I decided to do it. I don't know if I'm going to do it again because it was like a massive process. Maybe we'll see. But I projected Tyro Estrada to lead all second basemen in stolen bases. Taking that L, putting it out there for everyone to hear. It sounds absolutely ridiculous now, but I thought he had the opportunity. He has the speed. I thought Melvin was going to have a green light for him. I think it was Jason Collette or somebody gave a presentation at FPAS talking about how they're going to steal more, and he just didn't. And Wyatt Langford, 98th percentile sprint speed, just didn't steal. And Bochy just didn't want to give him the green light earlier on. It's been more as the season's gone on, but it's just so hard to predict stolen bases as a whole. But then you talk about Bichette, who's been on this decline. I feel like if he's in Toronto, there's no reason to project the difference
Yeah.
there unless there is a shift in John Schneider getting out of town, which that could happen any day at this point. It feels like, or something would have to change in his situation for the stolen bases to have to change. I think if that makes sense. I'm kind of
No, absolutely. I think you're spot on. Like I think like we saw like the Angels were kind of like a mid-level stolen base team last year, and like they're one of the top stolen base teams this year. But that's because they brought Ron Washington in, and Ron Washington likes to run. Like it, and like this is what is like one of the important things about like fantasy baseball is actually knowing baseball and being if you don't know it off the top of your head, like being able to go and look up like manager tendencies in the running game. I think that's really, really important. If the Blue Jays were to bring in a manager that prioritized the running game, like that would be really, really important for a guy like Bichette if he's still there. Or if Bichette gets moved to an organization where the team runs, like, yeah, that would like really, really change his value. But I mean, if the price gets too bad, like, or if the price gets too low, like I'll be in. Like I've always been a Bichette guy. For me, it's going to really depend on like where he ends up and what that price ends up looking like.
Yeah, I feel like just having watched him these last couple of years, I feel like what we've seen this year is just so not him. I don't know if it was something that maybe Don Mattingly or somebody altered the swing or whatever it was in Toronto, but there needs to be a change, probably a big change until something is going to change in terms of his outlook for fantasy purposes for sure, especially in terms of those stolen bases. But you mentioned the Angels, excuse me, you mentioned the Angels there a couple times. And I wonder if that might have been why we saw Mike Trout start to steal a little bit more this year because it was Ron Washington. In his 29 games, he stole 6 bases, which is as many as he'd stolen in the previous 4 years combined. I wonder if that might have played a part there. But on the Trout topic as a whole, let's say we hear he's healthy coming into the year. I'm guessing this is probably going to be the cheapest Mike Trout has ever been going back to 2012 when he first came up as a rookie. Where would it have to be? Where would the price have to be on Trout for you to be interested?
That's really, really tough. I think it really depends on your league context, right? Like if I'm in a 10-team league, I'm much more likely to take a gamble on a guy like Mike Trout because there's replacement value on the wire. In a 15-team, like 5 outfielder league, man, it becomes really, really difficult, even with the upside being there. Like it's, let's talk about another guy who has been like fantastic when he's on the field, but he has not been on the field all that much in Royce Lewis, right? Like I love Royce Lewis's talent, but he has really, really struggled to stay on the field. Like on a per plate appearance basis, like Royce Lewis, like is an elite player, right? He's giving you negative dollar value, like in a 12-team league this year because he's missed so much time. And so, like the same type of thing can be said for Trout, who I think is still an elite or close to elite talent when he's on the field on a per plate appearance basis. I can't take a guy, especially in a deeper league, that is going to potentially give me negative value. And so for me, I probably, unless the price really just bottoms out, I think the problem is Mike Trout's name value is still high enough that he won't go outside of like the top 100. And so for that reason, I'm probably not going to be in. But hey, you never know, man. We've seen players drop off that we thought were going to always be like, top tier picks. And then they go outside the top 150 and we go, screw it. At that point, I'll take the gamble, right? I'll dart throw it. But yeah, I think it's really going to have to depend on where Trout ends up in the ADP.
I think that 150 range is probably going to be it for me if he does get there, because I took him once or twice this season, and I think it was in the 80 to 90 type of range. I feel like he kind of has to fall out, but to your point, he's still a lot of people will just see that name. I don't know if it'll be that way in NFBC drafts. I feel like there he might be going a little bit later because those players just generally, like if we're talking main events, I don't know if he's going to be a top 100 pick. Maybe he is. It's just so hard. He's just so enticing because if you do, I said it recently. There's going to be 1 year where Trout just stays healthy again. It's going to happen probably one more time. You're not going to be able to really tell when it's going to be, but you'll get one more year of like 30 homers. He drives in 100. He hits 310. Will it be next year? Will it be 2 years from now? I don't know, but I think it's going to happen.
The problem is we keep saying that about Byron Buxton too.
Yeah.
And it just never seems to happen. And like, don't get me wrong, like you love like, but and I had no problem dropping Buxton this year because his price had dropped so far that it was like, hey, like if it doesn't work out, if he gets hurt and misses a bunch of time, like I can drop him. The hard part with guys like Mike Trout and Byron Buxton for many years is you don't want to drop them. Like you don't want to let them go. Like before he was ruled out, a lot of people still had their drafted Mike Trout on the roster, and they were just burning a roster spot when they could have. Even in leagues with IL spots, there are other injured guys you could throw in those IL spots. You're burning value on guys who might come back and actually help you. And so, I think if you're really callous in the way you look at fantasy and you go, I can drop him, and like you honestly can, then like it makes sense to draft a guy like Mike Trout if you get a good discount. But if you're one of those people, and I am one of these people that like to hold on to my dudes, I don't think you should draft him because you're going to end up in a situation where you're in a roster crunch because you can't let go of Mike Trout.
That's totally fair. I picked him up. So I drafted him, I think, twice, and then I picked him up in TGFBI. My TGFBI team has been one of my better teams this year. It's been first or second in my league the whole year. It's been top 30 or so overall. And Mike Trout hit the waiver wire, and I had a bunch of fab, and I threw 210 at him or something like that. Just pissed it away. Didn't get a single at bat out of it. But I think that goes back to the point of he's just so enticing of the what if. What if he is able to just stay healthy? And, maybe we should just kind of give it up and not expect it to happen, especially as long as he's an Angel. I wonder what would happen, if he got traded to the Phillies or something. Because I feel like that could be like a Chris Sale type of revitalization if something like that happened. And there's been some kind of discussion I saw. I don't know how serious, probably not too serious, but can you imagine how in people would be if he got traded to the Phillies? I feel like he'd be a top 50 pick again.
I mean, he's from Philadelphia. I think it's mostly because that's where he would want to go if the Angels aren't going to be competitive.
Yeah.
Mike Trout deserves to be in the playoffs. Like at some point in his career. Like it's ridiculous that we've in, your and my lifetime, we've seen two generational talents come through Major League Baseball in the last decade. And I mean, Ohtani's going to get to see the playoffs this year, no doubt. Yeah. But this will be the first year that either a Trout or Ohtani have made the playoffs. Like, that is outrageous. They were on the same team and couldn't make the playoffs. Two generational talents.
They won 5 of 10 MVPs in the American League over the last 10 seasons. They won half of them, and they got 3 playoff games out of it. I think it was 3.
Yeah, that's unreal.
It's disgusting. Something else that's kind of been disgusting there, not meant to be a segue, but Pablo Lopez for the season. I've been a believer in him. I've been, I've written about him as a buy low, I think, 5 to 7 times this year. 4.67 ERA. It does have a 115 whip associated with it. 11 wins and 24 starts is really good in this day and age. But I think we're going to get a pretty significant discount on him because of just how frustrated people have been. Certainly, I think in the more casual formats on the Yahoos, the ESPNs, the CBS leagues, he's going to probably drop pretty dramatically. Probably not as much if we're talking about the high stakes guys, because they're going to see that he had a 332 xFIP, that he has a 336 SIERA. He still has a 21% strikeout minus walk rate. He's just been pretty unlucky this season, but I wonder how that will affect his price. What do you think it'll do to Pablo, who I believe was like a 3rd or 4th round pick coming into the year?
So Pablo will be one of these guys that starts off way too low and then gains steam as draft season continues to go on. Happens every year, especially because there will be the Paul Skenes, the Garrett Crochets of the world that like everybody are really, really in on, and kind of they push up these young prices. And so Pablo will be probably like right around pick 100, my guess is. And then as draft season goes on, he will like increase round by round. So if you like Pablo Lopez, I'd recommend getting into an early draft because I think you're going to get a really nice price on him. And I love Pablo Lopez. So even though I was already going to be in early drafts because I'm a degenerate like you, like Pablo Lopez will be on a lot of my early drafted teams. I agree. I think he's just been extremely unlucky. I don't think there's anything wrong with him necessarily. I think he's just had some bad outings that kind of just got away from him. I also think there was some really bad early season usage by the Twins, not pulling him when they probably should have pulled him. And that just inflated his numbers. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's going to be great down the stretch. And I think he's going to be a discount coming in drafts next year.
It's kind of hard to figure out. Like, I think it does come down to the home runs with him. It's a 1.47 homer per 9. He's a 1.13 guy for his career. But there hasn't really been such a dramatic change in the quality of contact against. Like, the barrel rate went from 6.3 to 8.3, which is not nothing, but it's not enough that you'd think it would be that dramatic in terms of the output of home runs. The hard hit rate, 35% to 39%. It's still pretty good. Like, he's not giving up more fly balls than usual. It's just bad luck, I think, more than anything else, which is going to lead to a really nice discount, I think, in a lot of leagues next season. Certainly if you are somebody who just plays 1 or 2 leagues and it's a home league on Yahoo with your friends, as opposed to, like Justin said, the degenerates like us who spend like thousands of dollars on this stuff, you're going to get super, super discounts on him. He is going to be going probably a pick. I don't know. He might even fall outside of I don't know, maybe not outside the top 100, but like 70 to 90 type of range, probably in a lot of those leagues. And it's going to be something I'm going to be doing pretty much every single time. I think one guy who's going to be very hard to assess next season, and part of it I think will depend on landing spot, is Jack Flaherty. Jack Flaherty has been just brilliant, just unbelievably good this season. I thought that he had a chance for the American League Cy Young if he stayed there. And just by the numbers, he'd been arguably the best pitcher in the American League, up there with Skubal and Crochet this year, like a 27.5% strikeout minus walk. He's got just incredible underlying numbers that are even better than what you see on the surface in a lot of cases. But he's not somebody that has a track record of doing this every single year. He's done it twice over, I don't know, what, 7, 8 years. He's had 2 incredible seasons, but I don't know what we're going to expect out of him next year. And I don't know, I guess a lot of it will come down to once he signs, but like we've talked about, we're going to be drafting probably well before that. So an unsigned Jack Flaherty goes at pick 75 to 100, 120. I really have no idea on Jack Flaherty.
I mean, unless there's like a massive hiccup or something towards the end of the season, I think he's going to go higher than that. And I will not be in on that price just because I don't love his injury profile and I don't love a guy on a brand new contract going to a brand new organization. Now, if the Dodgers were to re-sign him, I would think differently because the Dodgers are the Dodgers. But if he ends up anywhere else, I think I'm probably going to be out on the hype. I've loved Jack Flaherty in the past. This was my first year, like, not buying back in on Jack Flaherty, of course. But there's so much downside to that upside. And going to a new situation, I mean, we saw what happened, when he went to Baltimore for that half season. We saw what it was like for years in St. Louis after the initial breakout. And I just, the Yankees had a problem with his medicals. Like, that scares the crap out of me. And this has not been a guy who's been healthy a ton over the course of his career. So I don't think I would pay a top 50 price. And I think that's probably what you're going to have to pay to get Jack Flaherty.
Much as I like him, much as I've been a huge fan, I put a Cy Young bet on him in the American League earlier in the year, which gets flushed down the toilet at the deadline, but I just don't even care at that point. I've just been such a big fan of his. I have him on a couple teams, but I don't trust him as far as I could throw him. If he's going in the top 50, even if he re-signs with the Dodgers, that means you're paying a 3rd or 4th round price in a lot of cases. SP1 or SP2. I wouldn't trust him as that.
Yeah.
Like this season, he's been your SP5 or 6, probably, like where you drafted him, not in terms of his performance, but where you had to take him. Entrusting him with the lead role of your staff, I don't know that I'd really want to do that unless I am taking a couple of pitchers early on, like somebody that I feel is more safe. If I'm getting like a Logan Webb type or somebody in there that I think is more stable, maybe. But man, it's a little bit of a risk to take in the top 50 if that's where he's going.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't do it.
Just sticking with the Dodgers, Tyler Glasnow, I think, is also going to be a pretty interesting one. He has, knock on wood, for the most part, been able to stay healthy. They put him on the IL over the All-Star break, but I feel like that was just to kind of get a little bit of extra rest, maybe just save a couple extra days. I don't know if that was like something that really was that was actually bothering him, but they have been taking it really, really carefully with Glasnow. He actually just had his start pushed back. He was supposed to start on Friday, but he's going to start on Saturday. So they're taking it pretty easy with him. He's at 134 innings, which is a career high. We're probably going to talk about 160 by the time all is said and done. Maybe he gets a little bit more, but the way that they're playing it, he's probably every 6th day going forward. So maybe he gets 6 more. Maybe it's more than 160, but somewhere in that range. So he'll have done it at this point, right? He'll have stayed healthy for the most part for a whole season. Does that mean we're now going forward saying Glasnow is somebody that we trust? Is he worthy of that, probably 2nd or 3rd round price where he's going to be going if he stays healthy?
I mean, I think you have to give him a little bit more credit than maybe I was giving him coming into the season. I don't know that you wipe away like 8 years of injury risk just because he stays healthy for one season. So I think he's gonna be probably one of these top 5 pitchers off the board, and for good reason. He's an elite pitcher on a per inning basis. He plays for ostensibly the best team in Major League Baseball. in the Dodgers. So I have no problem with anybody taking Glasnow as a top 5 pitcher. I don't know where I'm going to fall out on it, to be quite honest. I think the last 6 weeks he needs to stay healthy. He needs to stay healthy through the postseason. And even then, I'm probably going to still have some reservations just personally. But again, like I mentioned kind of earlier on in the show, like this is one of the reasons why like I just tend to be as risk averse as possible early on. And Tyler Glasnow does not fit in that plan. I'm totally fine someone else getting him because I'm going to get an elite player too at that spot.
Yeah, I'm totally there. I did 16 drafts this season, which I'm probably going to pare down next year. It's a lot to handle. But I took Tyler Glasnow one time. It was in Tout Wars, and that was where I kind of went very risky with my picks. I took Jazz Chisholm. I took O'Neal Cruz, which has worked out for the most part. But it's not something that I'd recommend, that type of build generally. It was just like I'd done so many drafts. I wanted to have a bit of a different build. It's a different setup in Tout Wars, but I don't know that Glasnow fits into the plans unless, like we're talking about with Flaherty to some extent, you back him up with a lot of security. And at that point, you are missing out on those early round bats. And I think at that point, it's not really worth it. Like you said, 1 year healthy doesn't really wipe out everything else. Now, it's kind of 2 years in a row where he's been mostly healthy, but I still think that it's, I don't know, just a little bit too risky for me where he's probably going to end up going. Like, there's still a chance that Glasnow ends up with the Cy Young in the National League. I think it's probably going to be Chris Sales, but if Glasnow has 4 or 5 Glasnow-esque starts, finishes with a 2.6, 2.7 ERA, he might win the Cy Young, and that'll just, of course, push the price up even further, a couple picks. So, is it crazy to think that he might be in the first round in a couple drafts potentially?
Oh, he for sure will be. I wouldn't be shocked. Like I honestly think he's gonna be the number 2 pitcher or number 3 pitcher off the board. So like I think, yeah, especially early on, he won't be in the first round because pitchers don't tend to go that early or go in the first round very often in early drafts. But as we start getting to March, if he's healthy, yeah, he will. I'm sure he will be. I can't imagine spending a first round pick on Tyler Glasnow, and that, I mean, I'm not gonna like make fun of anybody that does it, but I will advocate against it. I just think there's way too much risk with a guy that has had that many injury issues over the course of his career going that high.
I totally agree. If he's a first rounder, even if he's a second rounder, I don't think I could really take that risk. One more guy I want to ask you about, and this one will be really interesting as well. It's Marcell Ozuna, who hasn't played a game in the field again, so he will just be utility only. I think for whatever reason, I'm just going to double check and make sure it's still the case. He has outfield eligibility on Yahoo, which is just great if anybody has him on Yahoo, but I think for the most part, he's going to be utility only heading into next season. He's done it again. 35 homers, 90 ribbies. He's batting 300 on a team that where like every star player has disappointed or been hurt this year. Olsen was a disappointment. Riley was. Acuna's been hurt. Albies has been hurt. He's kind of been the only guy that's really done his part over there. Career high 17.7% barrel rate, 55 on the hard hit. I don't know that I really trust it. Everything that we've seen about the aging curve is that at around 32, you tend to start losing something off your swing. He's 33, going to be 34 going into next year, but he's just put up his best hard hit data in his career. So what do we make of Ozuna? There was a couple of second half drafts where I was in, did a couple second half gladiators, and he was like a second round pick. Is that what the price is going to be for a DH only 34-year-old? I don't know.
No, he won't be a second round pick. He'll go. So I don't know if you were playing when David Ortiz was kind of in the league, but Ortiz always kind of fell in that 4th round. And I think that's where Ozuna will be. There are too many people that do not like drafting UT only players, much less a UT only player that early. So, I mean, Ohtani obviously breaks the bank and breaks calculations when it comes to that stuff. So don't include him. But I'm trying to remember who the other UT only guy was around the same time as Ortiz. But like they always, it was Nelson Cruz. They never really broke into the 3rd round for the most part. They were always in the 4th round. They were always a good value, like 4th, 5th, 6th round, and they were always a great value. So that's where I think Ozuna ends up. And I think, like I said, I think he'll probably end up being a pretty good value because you're getting a guy who just smashes the ball, does it with a good batting average, plays every day, DHs, so he doesn't really get hurt. So I mean, I think he's going to continue to just kind of rake in value for people. This is one of the guys that I did not end up with on enough teams, in spite of the fact that he was one of my biggest like identified bargains in my projection. I just always seem to end up with a different UT only player, and I really kicking myself for it, because I did have him identified as like a guy who could be like a third or fourth round value that you were getting way too late, and I just would go, oh well, I can get, I can't remember, Eloy later, I can get Buxton later, I can get, and I should have just soaked up the value that I had written on my spreadsheets and been really happy with it, because I think a number of my teams would be running away with leagues as opposed to just being competitive.
Imagine if, a lot of those pieces, like imagine if Acuna was healthy and Albies was healthy, and if Riley and Olsen had been their usual selves this year, we might be talking about like 120 and 120 instead of what's going to be like 90 and 110 or something, because he's at 74 and 90 with the disappointing team all around him. It's crazy what he's been able to do. I do worry about investing in a guy as he gets older, but based on what we've seen this year, I think there's probably one, if not maybe even two more seasons left in the tank for Ozuna, and hopefully we get those guys kind of rebounding next year. We've already talked about Acuna, Albies will be back. I think we're probably going to be looking at a much better version of the Braves going forward. Been great to catch up with you, man. It's been far too long. We should do this more often.
Absolutely. Well, I gotta have you come. I haven't been recording as much on Sundays, which is usually my guest episode, but I'm gonna have to make an exception. We're gonna have to figure out time for you to come on my pod, do a little home and home, because I do miss talking to you, brother.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. I just had Paul on actually as the previous guest, and we were also talking about getting something together. So I know he doesn't usually do Sundays, but we should try and figure out if we can get all three of us together.
Well, you're free during the week, so we could probably get something together. I'll talk to Paul when I talk to him tomorrow.
Absolutely. Let's figure something out. Remind everybody what you got going on. Obviously, we're at FanGraphs doing Sleeper in the Bus, but what else is going on in your world?
Yeah, so I read at FanGraphs usually 5 times a week, 4 to 5 times a week. And then Fantasy Pros, I write 3 articles a week over there. And then Sleeper in the Bus podcast, FWFB podcast has kind of gone dormant just because of my schedule. Like my podcast partners, Dave McDonald and Ray Kuhn, like they're like, where are you? Why aren't you? So I'm going to try to hopefully get that going here again. It's been crazy with, kids, especially in the summertime at home, trying to figure out. And I mean, I work 80 hours a week, so like I've just been having a hard time. But Sleeper in the Bus, we put out 3 to 4 episodes a week. So if you're looking for more podcast content, you can always come over there, or definitely check out my written work. I love writing at Fantasy Pros. It's and at FanGraphs. So like, and I really want to start doing more writing. So I'm hoping people enjoy that.
Fantasy Pros is a fantastic place to work. It's been awesome doing work there. Justin and I are technically colleagues, and we should probably, do something together on Fantasy Pros, but make sure you're checking out everything that he has going on at Justin Mason FWFB on Twitter. You got to be listening to Sleeper in the Bus. I'm sure you guys probably already are. It's a go-to for most fantasy baseball players, but check it out if you haven't already. You want to keep up with my work, it's at Joe Orico 99 on the Twitter. And tomorrow is actually a really busy day. I'm on 4 podcasts that are going to be coming out tomorrow. My own show. I'm hosting the Fantasy Pro show with Welsh. I'm also guesting on In This League this week with Welsh. So double Joe and Welsh tomorrow. And then I'm filling in for Ray Murphy on the news section of Baseball HQ Radio tomorrow. So early morning for me with PD, with Patrick Davitt. Lots of stuff coming out. So make sure you guys are checking that out. You're going to be really sick of me if you listen to all that stuff. So maybe don't listen to all of it, but maybe check out 1 or 2 of those things. If you haven't done so already, really appreciate any ratings and reviews you guys can leave on the show. Really does help to fight off the football crowd as people start to head off for the year. But make sure you guys are doing that if you haven't already. But that'll do it for us today. We'll be back again tomorrow, wrapping up Thursday slate, looking ahead to the weekend, talking about some streamers. But until then, everybody, take care. Have yourself a great night.